Montgomery, here with Josh Bakan. We're doing the Varsity845 Basketball Final Four podcast. Section 9's got 5 teams playing this weekend upstate in the Final Four. We've got the Middletown boys in Class AA, the Marlboro boys in Class B, and the girls have Marlboro in B, Pine Plains in C, and Eldred in D. We're going to take a look at each of those teams, talk about how they got here and what they have to expect this weekend. First, I'm going to talk about the story that I had in the paper today on Tuesday. Marlboro, just the community they have. It's really cool. Julia Rusk on the girls' team, Jack Rusk on the boys' team, they're cousins, so that's neat in itself that they get cousins on both teams going. Both of their fathers had played for Marlboro in the 80s. Mike Kohler, who's the boys' coach, had coached the girls' coaches when they were players, and there's just layers upon layers of family and tradition and history there. So that's a really cool story, and it's going to be a fun weekend for Marlboro with both their teams going up. So you can check out that story on Varsity845.com. But as far as the teams, Josh, let's start with the Marlboro boys in Class B. How did this team get here, and what can we expect from them this weekend?
Well, you can really go off of that family and community aspect and bring it to this team. They're pretty much all high-character guys. There's a lot of depth. They really pick up for each other. And they don't necessarily have the star power, but that's because they're all just so fundamentally sound that they kind of blend into a well-tuned machine. And you saw it last weekend where Joe Nugent left the game with a dislocated shoulder. He's questionable for Friday, last Mike Kohler told me. And you really saw everyone else still continue to pick up in that win to bring them to their first Final Four in school history at the state level. And so what do you got here? You have a deep backcourt with Tyler Jolly, Nick Mangelli. Nick Mangelli's the sharpshooter. Tyler Jolly's just a very good all-around player. Then they got good reserves with John Perugino, Jaden Allen. Both sophomores, both will probably be kind of picking up the guard next year along with Joe Nugent when they return. And then the front court, you got Xavier Oliver, who's leading the team in points, rebounds, and assists. Not necessarily huge numbers in each because they're just so deep. 12.7 points, 8.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists. That's just because the ball movement's great all over and everyone's contributing. And then you have Jack Rusk, who is a very interesting player to watch. Will wrote a little bit about him today. He's a center who had a growth spurt during high school. He was 5'10" going in, was a guard his whole life. Then he just grew. And so now he's kind of a center by default, but still brings those guard skills to the position. He's a great shooter. Made all his free throws after he was constantly at the free throw line in the last game. And he's also a pretty good ball handler. So that's what you have there. And as far as opponents go, Bishop Grimes, who they'll be facing in the semifinal, they're kind of similar to Marlboro in a way. In their quarterfinal game, they had 5 players score between 10 and 14 points. That's a very Marlboro stat line usually, just because they're so balanced. And, Bishop Grimes, it's their first time since 1995 making it to the state Final Four, coincidentally same as Middletown. And they're kind of a new-look team as they've been in the past. They have Coach Bob McKinney, who's a state legend. He's won 5 state championships with Jamesville DeWitt. Left the program last year. They didn't renew his contract, and as far as my research goes, the reason why hasn't been publicly explained. So he's picking up a Bishop Grimes and just instantly instilling a winning tradition. They're very scrappy, just hardworking from what Mike Kohler tells me. And then, in the other state final matchup, state semifinal, you got Olean and Hudson. If Marlboro wins, either way, they'll be facing an undefeated team in the final. Marlboro, interestingly enough, is second place in today's state poll. And Olean is first place. Hudson is in the top 10, I believe. They've had some close matchups to get here, but, that can help a team at this point to have to go through that adversity.
As far as this Marlboro team, you've seen them play a couple times. They are deep. Can they give you different different looks. Can they go offensive? Can they go defensive? Can they go big? Can they go small? And how does that help them going into this Final Four where they're going to be playing different teams they haven't seen before? Can they give you different looks with all the different players they have?
It's much more of a small ball team. If they do face a bigger team, then they do kind of adjust their game. They faced a bigger team in the first round of the state tournament, and what they did was they made Jack Rusk more of a perimeter player, and he can thrive on the perimeter as well. And, you just had Nick Mangelli raining threes and other players shooting well. So that's kind of what they do to you. So if they face a team with freakish size at this level, freakish size for a Class B school, then they might have to try kind of the same thing and just give it their best shot. But for the most part, they're really a small ball team, and if they face another team like that, then they got a good shot playing that style.
All right, we'll switch over now to the Marlboro girls in Class B, and I guess really the story with this team is the starting lineup. They've got 4 different kids who can score, and they can score in different ways. And I think everything with Marlboro girls starts with Missy Sadler, senior forward. She's just the Energizer bunny out there, just grabbing rebounds left and right. And she just inspires everyone to, match her energy. And she's had some really great games in the playoffs. And in their state quarterfinal game on Saturday, she was hitting some threes. So she can also score some points outside in addition to everything she does under the basket. You have Julia Rusk, who's really kind of a do-it-all player for Marlboro, depending on the game, depending on the situation. She can be that outside shooter. She can be that inside presence. She's very good at distributing the ball. Kind of whatever they need, she can do. You've got junior point guard Taylor Felicello. She is also a good three-point shooter and really a good passer, really runs that offense well, gets the ball where it needs to go. Then they've got sophomore guard Talea Lewis. She is really kind of a dynamic player in her ability to drive to the rim. She can also shoot the three. She's had a really good year this year, scoring points. And the 5th starter for them is Jetta Stevens. She's a freshman. I've got a feature on her coming up in the paper this week. Basically, she was a JV player as an 8th grader last year, started playing summer league games with the varsity kids this summer, and when practice started, varsity tryout, she was there, and she just kind of fit right in with this group, and she doesn't score a lot of points. The other 4 kids take care of that, but she does all the little things that needs to get done defensively, rebounding, passing, and again, kind of depending on the game, depending on the situation, she just kind of fits in where Marlboro needs her. She's been a real key player for them, just kind of all around as a freshman. And really, the one player off the bench that they will turn to is an 8th grader, Erin LaFaro. She was on JV earlier this year. They've called her up about halfway through the season, and she hasn't got a ton of minutes in the playoffs. They've really relied on that starting 5 most of the time, but when they put her in there and need her, she comes through for them. So those are the 6 key players from Marlboro. They play West Hill of Section 3 in a semifinal on Friday morning, and it sounds almost like these are kind of mirror image teams of each other. West Hill's got a big 3 instead of 4. Those 3 players score a lot of their points. They've got sisters Delaney and Mackenzie Martin, as well as Mary Kate Washburn. Those 3 combined for 61 of their 72 points in their quarterfinal win. So it seems like it should be a real good game between those 2 teams on Friday, with the winner going on to the finals. On the other side of the bracket, you've got Livonia and Canton. Both those teams had pretty close state quarterfinal games. Livonia was a 56-52 winner over Olean, and Canton beat Northeastern Clinton 50-48. So we'll see what happens in that game, but Marlboro will be looking to make it to the finals with a win over West Hill on Friday morning.
Now, are there certain teams or certain types of teams that Marlboro might match up better against, like certain dynamics they might thrive against?
Marlboro does not have a lot of size, and really, Julia Rusk in previous years was more of a guard. This year, just by default, she's kind of had to play more of that forward position because they don't really have anybody else. So if they play a team, with a real tall, dominant center, that might give them some trouble. They haven't run into that yet so far in the playoffs. They've been pretty lucky. Really, the thing that Marlboro, what they like to do is push the tempo. They want to just fast break, use their defense to force turnovers, get down on the other end of the court, score in a hurry. And I think they feel that if they play that way, it doesn't matter who they play. They're not too worried about the matchups. They know if they play their game, they're going to score a lot of points and they're going to do okay. So that's the game plan for them. When they win, that's how they do it. That's what works. And I think with that West Hill scoring 72 points in their quarterfinal game, I think it's going to be a high-scoring, back-and-forth, fast-paced game on Friday afternoon. So we'll wrap up with Marlboro. And Josh, what about the Middletown boys in Class AA?
Well, Middletown, as mentioned, is making their first state Final Four since 1995. They're going to be facing Baldwin. And they've got a lot of tough opponents from here on out. Obviously everyone's tough once you get to this level. But then in the other bracket, you got Shenendehowa and Aquinas Institute. Shenendehowa is the defending state champions, and they're still undefeated and still winning by an awful lot most of the time. And with Middletown, they've had a pretty, not to discredit them, a pretty enviable path to get here. They had a quarterfinal game at Auk, which is pretty much a home game, and then they've had 2 extra days to prepare, 2 more than Baldwin, who played on Sunday. Middletown played last Friday, and it's obviously not Middletown's fault, but something they can use to their advantage, be a little more rested up and a little more practice. And they've got a very deep lineup on their side. They've got do-it-all point guard Daniel Grant. He's scoring double figures. His assists and rebound numbers are usually close to double figures, sometimes exceeding them, sometimes getting triple doubles. And then, you have Jordan Bryan, the Energizer Bunny, as he calls himself, and as I'm sure others would call him. He always just has a couple hype-inducing plays every game. He's a good rebounder. Even though he's a 6'2" guard, he's the one who's taking the tip-off at the beginning of the game because he can just jump out of the building. And then you have Kyle Brown, a little bit of an underrated, unsung hero on this team. Even though he is consistently scoring double figures, he's had very big fourth quarters against Fox Lane and against Burke these last 2 games, and he's really coming on. And then you got Kenny Middleton, another guard in this guard-heavy team, where he's a very tenacious defender. He's a good scorer, another guy who really feeds off the energy, kind of like Jordan Bryan and a lot of this team. And at, I don't want to say center, but at forward, their big guy starting is Brighta Full, who he's not much of a scorer, but the guy really plays lockdown defense, and he's kind of really mitigated the opposing bigs in the last 2 games. Middletown was facing bigger teams like Fox Lane and Burke, but thanks to Brighta Full really spearheading the defense, they've been really able to defend the interior, and guys like Jose Gonzalez, Evan Roberts have contributed as well to neutralizing those bigs, and that gives them a better chance now that they're at this level, and they're going to be facing bigger teams, no matter who they're facing, now that they're in the state semifinals. As far as opponents go, Baldwin had kind of a crazy win on Sunday, where they scored 15 unanswered points when they were down 5 with 2:51 to go, and pulled out that game. Middletown played Baldwin 2 years ago. They won by a point in a Long Island tournament, the Upstate Downstate tournament, and Daniel Grant was part of the team, and Shane Gatling was part of Baldwin. Shane Gatling is the sharpshooting point guard, averaging 17.5 a game, and he, just racks up the steals and the deflections. Very tough offensive and defensive matchup for Daniel Grant, but if anyone in Section 9 is up to it, it is Dan Grant, who's also a very good on-the-ball defender. And Baldwin's got size as well. They got Jared Roden, this 6'6" forward. He's averaging 20 a game. He's got very good range, really developing that three-pointer this year, so he can probably be a big guard at the next level as well. And, they have a couple other players who are 6'7", 6'8", not to, put too much into size, but that's obviously something they're going to have to plan for when they face Baldwin, who also has a very good defense. And I was told by Newsday that Coach Darius Burton offers rewards to them when they hold teams to fewer than 55 points, like fewer wind sprints in practice, things like that. So we'll see how Middletown does against Baldwin.
All right, Josh, you've been covering this Middletown team all year. Last year they won Section 9. They won an opening round game up in Johnson City by the skin of their teeth. I think they ran into a really good Mount Vernon team in the quarterfinals. This year, was it kind of Final Four or bust with this team? Is this where they want to be? Is this where they expect it to be? Are they just kind of taking it one game at a time? Are they happy to be there? What's kind of the mood with this team, being one of the Final Four teams in the state?
I know it's kind of cliche where teams say, it's always Final Four or bust, but I think with Middletown, they truly embrace that. They have this kind of identity, this just gritty chip on your shoulder identity, even though they're, pretty much the best team in Section 9, where they have been battle tested. They had a couple non-league losses. They lost to Pine Bush earlier and even Kingston this year. And I think they do really take that personally. Jordan Bryan says they're thinking about Glens Falls all the time. And I think they play a style that really embraces the team. It's not really necessarily the Daniel Grant show. Well, on the stat sheet, it might look like it, but when you see a game, he's really the calm elder statesman in this elaborate motion offense. That's kind of like the eye of the storm. And I think everyone just really embraces the way they play. It's very much a team defense where if they're facing bigs, they'll just, kind of swarm and make things really troublesome for those interior players. And it just seems like that identity really bodes well toward advancing far in the tournament.
All right, we will wrap up here with the small school girls. Real quick on Pine Plains and Class C, they're outside of our coverage area, but they do have some notable things here. It's their second straight trip to the Final Four. Last year they lost to Northern Adirondack in the semifinal round, 49-39. Pine Plains gets a real tough draw. This year they'll play defending state champions Cooperstown in the semifinals on Saturday. And we have Eldred girls in Class D. Really for Eldred, this journey started 6 years ago. Point guard Sheila Burns and center Kelsey Collins were seventh graders on the modified team. Ryan Jasper was in his first year of coaching. Those three have really come along together over the years, up through JV 4 years ago and starting all together on that varsity team when they were sophomores. Eldred won Section 9 that year by default. There was no other teams that qualified for the playoffs. Section 1 didn't have any Class D teams. Long Island didn't have any Class D teams. So they basically got a bye straight into the state semifinals. They hadn't played for a month. They had to play a 9 a.m. game against a Romulus team that was great. They went on to win the state title the next day. And they've been wanting to get back to the state semis ever since. Last year, they won Section 9 again. They ran into a South Courtright team in the state quarterfinal round. They were a tie game with 2 minutes to play, but Courtright pulled away at the end. And so it's all been leading up to the state quarterfinal game they had on Saturday against Milford. Milford came out, scored 7 points right off the bat. Things didn't look good for Eldred, but their defense was phenomenal the rest of the game. They went on to win 42-29. They head back to the state semifinals for the second time in 3 years, and I think they feel like they really earned it this year by having to win a playoff game to get there. And again, really their two key players are senior point guard Sheila Burns and senior center Kelsey Collins. Burns didn't score a single point in their state quarterfinal win over Milford. She didn't have to. Her job was lockdown defense on Milford point guard Addie Lawson. She did a great job of that. That really helped Eldred. And Collins is, kind of their 6'2" rebounder, scorer inside. They want to feed her the ball in the paint and have her score. But they also have junior guard Jordan Lepis, had a great game in that state quarterfinal win over Milford. She can shoot from the outside, she can drive, she can score a lot of different ways. Sophomore guard Sammy Clemens has kind of worked her way into the starting lineup. She's another good scorer for them. She just finds different ways to score, whether it's jump shots or trying to get inside. And sophomore forward Elena Goggin hit a real big three to kind of spark Eldred's rally in the fourth quarter in that state quarterfinal win. So she is another key player for them. Talking about tough draws with Pine Plains, Eldred gets a really tough draw here this year. They play defending state champion Hewelton in the semifinals on Saturday. They are 26-0. They won the state championship last year. Their key player is junior guard Paige McCormick. She's the reigning state player of the year. She's 6'6". She scores 1 million points. No one has really been able to stop her this year. Eldred's going to do everything they can to try to stop her. But she's going to be the player to watch in that game. And on the other side of the bracket, Fort Edward of Section 2 makes it to the Final Four for the fourth straight year. They are pretty close by to the venue in Troy, so they should have a lot of fans there. And Panama from Section 6 is there as well. Panama, like Marlboro and Shenandoah, sends both its boys and girls teams to the Final Four this weekend.
Now, Eldred players have been mentioning they're taking a lot more pride in this trip to the state semifinals because they feel like they really earned it this time. How much do you get the sense that having to go through this path to get here is going to help them now that they're in the state semifinals?
They definitely know what to expect. They've been there. They know the venue. They know the rhythms. They know the schedule. So that will definitely help. But I think really that first trip to the state semifinals a couple of years ago, what it instilled in them was just the amount of work that it takes to get there and the amount of work that it takes to be good when you get there. They play year-round. They started an AAU team this last off-season. They started playing that. They were playing against big AA schools, wherever they could play. So they've really put in the work. They've put in the effort. I was up at practice this morning. They've been going from 5 to 7 a.m. to get ready for those early morning games. So they're really pulling out all the stops to do everything they can, and they've been doing it for years. And, for those seniors, this is really their chance, and, hopefully they go up there and play well because they've been working for this for years. So it should be a special weekend for them. So I think that's going to do it for the podcast. We will have stories online all week. Check them out in the paper. I will put our Twitter handles on the video right here. We will be posting updates from the games all weekend long, Friday, Saturday, and we'll see what happens possibly on Sunday. And so check that out. Check out the stories. And thanks for listening. We'll see you guys this weekend.